Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Riverdale as well as the latest episode of Krypton. Like always, I'm going to talk about something that you want to listen to. You can always look in the description down below. I include the time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I say about this week's episode of Riverdale, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Krypton. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Riverdale. A really good episode. A lot of stuff went down in this episode. We're going to have to break down bit by bit. Obviously, first of all, we have Cheryl's whole situation, which is like so depressing. They're even talking about she went through quote unquote physical therapy to kind of, because I was wondering if that's what the whole thing they were talking about last episode, like her condition and stuff like that. I was like, are they talking about the whole her being gay thing? And I was like, well, that's a really interesting thing, because I thought her mom was going to escalate it and I thought it was like using that group to make it seem like it's other things. I thought that's what it was like. Oh, all the crazy stuff shows. I thought that's what it was. It's like, no, it was purely like, oh, my daughter needs to be literally quote unquote straightened out type of thing, which is like, oh, that's super depressing. Is actually kind of what it's kind of known for, like conversion therapy type of stuff is what they do. But basically, they're making Cheryl do all this labor and stuff like that. Just go. And it's sad because you actually see her start to break down, just because it's like she feels like no one's going to come for her. But MVP Nana Rose coming through, because she literally crawled to get to the phone to make sure that Tony found out the truth. And what also blew me away was the whole situation about Josie too. Because Josie and Cheryl had gotten close, so obviously Josie came along with Veronica and Tony, but then her mom showed her that stuff, and it's like, oh snap! I thought that was never going to come back around, that whole Chuck situation, but now it's got thrown in her face, and it's like, yep, Cheryl became obsessed with you. Oh yeah, the one that's behind all that. There was part of me was wondering, is like, could it actually be her mom that was behind him? I was like, no, it couldn't, because like, why would Cheryl that would have come up earlier in the story, so it was Cheryl doing all that. But it's also just because like, Cheryl, like I said, I've said it multiple times this season, she's super complicated. I mean, she's always been kind of like put down, at least by her mom, for being the way she is, being gay, like liking girls. And it's like she felt, she had an attraction to Josie, but she was like, oh, like, she got jealous and she didn't want to share you with anyone else. Yes, it's a little out there, but then again, it's like, it's Cheryl, and Cheryl, you can make the argument that Cheryl is very passionate, I guess is one way you can put it. And, it still doesn't justify everything. Like, I mean, it doesn't make up for what she did to Josie and stuff like that, and kind of getting Chuck in trouble for. But it's still a situation of like, I don't know, part of me wondered, was that all Cheryl, or did someone else kind of take it beyond that? I mean, it still makes you go, like, it has to be Cheryl because she's the one that drew it, but, like, the fact is Penelope was on top of it. Like, oh, Josie, you're here? Let me show you. Boom, boom, boom. And, like, just to make it so that Josie isn't a part of that anymore. Didn't stop Veronica or Tony either, which I guess says a lot, too, because it's like, no matter what, Cheryl's done, it's like, they still recognize it. It's like, she doesn't deserve to be in that situation, which I'm curious to see what happens in the next episode, like when it comes to that situation, like, as obviously, like in this episode, Josie never confronts her about it, but I'm sure that's something we're going to deal with in the future. And it's probably going to be Cheryl snapping back, like, no matter what, you didn't want to come for me, it's okay, I'm going to take you down like I'm going to take down everybody else. That's where my mind is, but maybe she'll actually feel sorry about it. I don't know. Like I said, it's just a situation of just like, she was kind of told to kind of demonize, like the way she feel, like there's a demonization to like why she feels the way she does, like, from her mom. And I think that just combined with just the whole Blossom family screwed up. It's not just Cheryl. Her and her brother, they was like bound to kind of get screwed. I mean, to be fair, we don't really know 100% of what Jason, we know a little bit of what Jason was about, but we don't even know if on a personal level was he a lot like Cheryl. I would assume so, them being twins and everything. It's actually interesting because there was that little moment at like one of the sisters was talking about the fact is that back when they were younger, like, well, they never said Nana, I guess they said younger, but Nana Rose would constantly confuse them, so she kind of dressed them as each other, like dressed Cheryl as Jason and Jason as Cheryl. That's kind of interesting. I guess that's supposed to complement what they were already saying, like, oh, you're so confused and have growing up with such a situation, no wonder you're as messed up as you are. That's kind of, I think, the point. But luckily, with help from Kevin, they busted Veronica and Tony busted her out, and obviously like Cheryl and Tony kissed. It was like, oh, sweet moment. I was kind of like, yo, isn't anyone going to applaud or anything? But I guess it's like everyone in that place is kind of in their own situation of kind of been broken down. So there's no, but I was like, oh, no clapping or nothing. I was halfway expecting someone to be like, hey, get out the way, you're ruining the movie. But it's like, no, dead silent in the movie. But it's like, hey, it finally happened. But Cheryl, like I brought up earlier, is kind of on the hell path. She's basically going to burn the city down. I mean, not the city, God, burn the school down just because it's like, yo, I'm taking my spot back. You thought I was bad before. Ooh, I'm back and worse than ever. Also, what she plans to do about her mom and her uncle. I'm definitely curious to see what that happens. Like, I wonder if she's going to go back home, or is she just going to like, I mean, she could kick it with Tony, I guess, now. But, I mean, I'm just curious to see what she does. Like, you know, it's just basically it's like, oh, revenge is best served cold. So, they need to both watch out for her. So, then along those same lines, a big part of this episode is the whole situation around that drug dealer dude, Dwayne. The car ends up getting found, and it's like everyone is literally shitting bricks about it. Obviously, Betty's still staying with Jughead, which FP's fine with, because he's like, you need to fix this, Alice, because if you don't like make up for this, you're going to ultimately lose Betty, because he talks about the fact is that Jughead would have rather have lived alone than live with him, you know, back in season 1 and everything. So, but basically it's just one thing after another, because Chick, trying to quote unquote help, he ends up getting Darla involved, the girlfriend. Now she wants $10,000, which they ended up paying her, which ultimately I'm like, don't do that. Because it's that situation. It's like, you never pay someone who's blackmailing you. Yes, it might help. And it kind of fits the tone of the episode. It's a short-term solution, because long-term, this person can keep pumping you for money over and over again. 2, I think it's a little suspicious that Chick just happens to call her trying to get information, trying to find out how much she knows. It's like, I don't know, man. In the past, he never seemed as freaked out about this situation as everyone else. It almost seemed like he was throwing in everyone else's faces, like, oh man, if you do that, oh man, you know, oh god, like, you know, Betty, you know, it's like, oh, if you're not careful, Jughead, like, you know, Betty and Alice might get caught up in this whole situation, and just all talking about how scared, like, Betty's making him and stuff like that. So immediately in the back of my brain, I'm like, this is a scam. Like, whether, like I said, Alice is still kind of like, no, he's my kid, whether or not, you know, Hal's his dad or not, which it seems like, it still doesn't change the fact is that he probably is a grifter. So the fact of the matter is, they were probably working together. He probably went out of his way to contact Darla. Who's to say she actually is Darla? It could be a lady pretending to be Darla. And then the dude who's beating him up, just he happens to come down. Like, oh, there's this all. I mean, to be fair, I guess they're all people that knew Dwayne, so there's all these connections and stuff like that. I don't know. It's a little suspicious. I'm still betting that, like, Chick had something to do with that. I mean, to be fair, when it's all said and done, Alice is like, yo, get the hell out. She's like, I love you, you're my son, but I need you to get out. You know, because she even forces Betty to come home just because it's like, oh, you're not going to give me any more ultimatums. I'm your mom. I'm laying down the law type of thing. That was, oof. And then finally, you know, it all kind of comes full circle for Alice, because obviously she has her problems with Betty being around the serpents and stuff like that. But obviously the serpent's not supporting Betty, because they're kind of like, no, you're not one of us. Mainly it's because of Alice, all that Alice has ever done being super anti serpent. Even though she was one, she turned her back on it. So obviously, like, they hold a grudge against her, even though Betty has done a lot to support the serpents and stuff like that. But they ultimately come through when they come to back her up when Darla and that dude are at their place. You know, freaking Jug coming through, knocking the door down. It's like, yo, got the blades out. Like, yo, you want to come at us? And it's like, oh, we'll go tell the sheriff. It's like, if you had something on us, really, you would have done, there would have been something that came about it by now. But, like, obviously there's nothing to be found on the car. Which, because you even had that moment at the beginning. It's like, so if people's like, oh, so you did wear gloves. They're like, yeah, maybe. We think so. It's like, you think so? It's like, yeah, we definitely did. It's like, God, you guys, you probably, like, you were two of the smartest people on this show. And, like, in my opinion, when it comes to figuring stuff out. But I guess it's like, it's a moment of panic and you're just trying, like, even I don't remember if they were actually wearing gloves. Like, were they? I feel like they weren't, but maybe they were. I just don't remember. That'd probably be an interesting detail to go back and rewatch a little preview at the beginning of the episode and see if they were wearing it or not. But nevertheless, but now things have kind of changed for Alice, which is kind of interesting, because it's like, oh my God, like the serpents actually came through. She's like, I'm not going to write any more bad press against you guys. I'm no longer going to turn my back. And the last thing we see is her going to FP. Because obviously we know that her and FP had a thing. Once again, that'd be weird if they did pick it up because it's like, well, your children are dating. And if you started, that'd be weird. It's already weird because you used to date. Now your kids are, it's kind of a whole thing. Which is kind of interesting too, because that just means that like Betty and Jughead are kind of like a repeat of history type of thing when you actually break it down like that. But nevertheless, I can only assume it could be one thing, and it might be that Alice is trying to go back to the serpents. Like she's like, oh, FP, let me come back. Like that might be where we're heading with this, but I don't know. I'm very interested to see where this whole chick thing goes. Like he's moved out, but it's like, I don't know. There's part of me just when it was all said and done, the look on his face, because I think they probably went further than he wanted to. It's like, yo, you get the 10,000 from it, and like, yo, we go split. But it's like the fact is, they're like, nah, we're gonna stay. He's like, no, you said you get the money and you leave, and like the look on his face, like he was just looking down. Obviously, there's a part of me that's like, well, he's just doing that because he feels bad because he caused more trouble. Maybe he really was trying to make things better, like actually try to help. Because even Betty was getting really, oh God, chick, can you ever help with anything? Do you just can you be helpful for like once? And maybe that was legitimately him trying, but I don't know, man. I've been so against that dude since the beginning, so I don't know. I'm always going to, like, even if he turns out to be okay, I still can't forgive him for all the stuff that's kind of dragged up this way. They still keep bringing it up because they're like, oh, it was Chick who killed Dwayne. It's most likely Alice who did it. That's what I'm thinking. Alice most likely did it, but it doesn't seem like she ever takes a confession to it. I don't know. Maybe she did, but every time the situation comes up, it's like, oh, this is all your fault, Chick. You're the one that killed the guy. It's like, no, it seems like Alice probably did, and she, doesn't want to admit what she's done. So, I don't know. Then on the opposite side of things, we have everything going down with the lodges. Obviously, Lenny and was it Carl return? Some of the other, mobsters. They want a bigger cut to this whole situation. And you had Archie stepping up. It's like, yo, I've done this and I've done that. Do not underestimate me or Mr. Lodge. And they kind of laugh Archie off. But Hiram was like, but you got spunk, kid. I like it. He's like, when you come hard like that, you got to make sure you back it up, though. Then you find out that Adams is actually a freaking traitor. It's like really kind of interesting considering that's the guy who was sent to test Archie's loyalty. Because you saw him give that look to Archie, like when Archie was stepping up at the restaurant. You almost like, oh, he was impressed. But I guess that was kind of like, I guess I got to beat that kid. Like, I don't know. He beat the crap out of Andre. But it's like, holy, I wasn't. Man, and the question came up too. It's like, how long has he been working with, the others? Like, was it just recently since they came to town, or was it before now? There's no telling with that. So now the whole family is on high alert. It's like basically got to watch their backs when this is all said and done. And so Archie joins up with Reggie and the rest of the Bulldogs, and instead of the red circle, they're the dark circle. I was wondering if that was like, oh, so I like that wasn't completely done yet, but they brought it back in a different fashion, and they blew up the car that Lenny and Carl came in. Like, luckily the police were about to show up, but obviously that the football team's only backing him up because Reggie was kind of like, oh yeah, Archie promised him like, okay, you can have the Bulldogs vote if you help out with this. So the question then becomes like, will they do that full circle? Like, because that whole like red circle situation happened because they backed Archie up, which yeah, Reggie backs Archie up with the whole like prison and lodges situations. That's where he stands, but I don't know what the rest of the team will be willing to literally get even more dangerous. There's one thing going up against the Serpents. This time you're going up against freaking mobster, so that's another thing, and that's something Hiram gets to at this near the end of the episode. And it's like, Archie, this is only a temporary solution. It's like, yeah, but when they come back, we will be ready. And that's the sad thing about this too, is like that divide is bigger and bigger between Archie and his dad. Because obviously there's that awkward moment where it's like Fred is getting help from Jughead about writing a speech kind of for his for his announcement to his run. And you have Archie kind of walking in. There's a little awkwardness between him and Jug. And then there's the awkwardness between him and Fred. And the sad thing is, like, this whole situation is kind of pushing Archie further and further away from everyone, whether it be his dad, Jughead, eventually Betty. I mean, it's not 100% there, but obviously it's going to be there soon enough. And his mom kind of chewed him out about like not showing up at Fred's announcement, even though he said he was going to. And it's like, for her, it's like she doesn't recognize the person in front of her. Because it's like Archie in the beginning, you know, it's like you idolize your dad. You would have done anything for him. You worshipped him. But now, look, I don't even recognize who are you. Who are you, Archie? And that's a big thing going forward. Like, who is Archie going to be? Like, is he fine being this person? Because you do see even though he's kind of smiles and goes ahead with it, like, because he is a loyal person by nature, it isn't just about Hiram. Like, when he promises something to people, he keeps his promise. That's just like who Archie is. It's just his loyalty nature that he'd feel bad going back on it, because I think it's a big part. I feel like it's still always about Veronica, and I think even Veronica doesn't quite see it yet, like the conflict this whole situation is putting on Archie. And I'd be curious to know, like, is it because she's only seeing what she wants to see? Or, you know, does she think like, you know, because for her, she thinks, you know, it can all be separated, which I don't think it can. You can think it can be separated all for long, but eventually all worlds kind of collide in these type of situations. There's no keeping everything separated. Their relationship from what he does with like the lodge's whole like Sodale project situation, as well as problems with him, Jug, his dad, his mom now, and Betty. It's just like, everything's falling apart, and he's like, you know, going closer and closer to like, you know, the lodges. So eventually they might be the only people, the only family, you know, Archie has. I mean, obviously his dad will never turn his back on him, I mean, unless Archie does something bad. I mean, obviously if he finds out more about what Archie's up to, but the fact is we are seeing Archie push that line back further and further and further. Luckily he hasn't gotten to that point. He can't come back from it. We had that whole thing with the red circle, but he came back. So, but the thing is, like, with things as they are now, with no one to kind of pull him back, because back then he had Veronica to help, basically it put things in perspective for him and kind of ended up pulling him back. When Veronica's one of the reasons pulling you forward towards this, it's like, I don't know, man. It does turn into that situation of like, is being with Veronica a good thing for him? Is that the good thing? You know, because he ultimately always, once again, tries to do the right thing, and he's doing what he believes is best for Riverdale, just like his dad is. And like I said, you can tell with the way things are, that's not getting better anytime soon. It's probably going to be a while. And I'll be, you know, and even when it's all said and done, even if it does get quote unquote better, things will never be the same. They haven't been for a while, and they will continue to not be the same. So I'm very interested to see like how all this unravels going forward in the next episode. So. And now moving on to this week's episode of Krypton. Another great episode with a lot of interesting things that kind of went down in this episode. I do kind of appreciate what they're doing with Seg and Lita, even though it's like they're kind of going down two different paths. They are trying to do the right thing in both their regards. I mean, in Seg's case, he's more so focused on revenge, especially when he has to sit there and listen to Darren talk about all the stuff about, oh man, me and your grandfather, we used to be friends. Oh, he was such a great man. All the history between the L's and the Vexes. And talking about, like, basically alluding to, like, oh yeah, like your grandfather made a supercomputer and he ended up talking about something coming this way. And it's like, oh, he was so preposterous, which is like, oh, that, you know, sometimes heroes stray from the true path, which is kind of interesting. I know a little bit about DC comic knowledge. Like I said, I know very little, but wasn't it Kryptonians who actually made Brainiac, like, back in the day? Because wasn't Brainiac, I mean, obviously you're fiddling around with canon and stuff like that, and I'm sure that canon changes all the time depending on whose hands it gets on, but wasn't Brainiac around the time like Krypton exploded? Like, because he started on Krypton, so I'm wondering, is that what the story's going to develop into, like them actually finding out, like maybe it might end up being Seg who ends up finding out that his family actually created like Brainiac years and years ago, and that basically their mistakes in the past is literally coming back to haunt. It might have not even just been him. It might have been all the main families, like Vex, M, L, and Zod all work together to make this. I mean, even though it seems like more so like the heavily technological families seem to be like potentially the Vexes, but definitely the L's seem like to be the top scientists, which is kind of interesting to me. I don't know. It just, I guess it's weird because I just never associate that. I guess it's because it's Superman and Supergirl, so I never just associate them with. I mean, to be fair, I guess if they grew up on Krypton, they probably would have been like super scientists and stuff like that. Maybe, I don't know. It's just kind of interesting. But I'm wondering, is that true? Because I vaguely remember that, especially like in the animated series and stuff, like Brainiac existing. Like, because I could have sworn it was like the L family that created him, or he was born on Krypton. So I don't know if that's going to be true for this. Like I said, I could be like misremembering that. So I'm curious, is that going to be like a turn we end up finding out that that's why Seg might feel even more responsible about destroying Brainiac, because it's like Krypton was his birthplace. I don't know, we'll see. I mean, actually, when you think about it, a lot of bad people were born from Krypton, because that was like Doomsday's whole thing too. He was born from Krypton too, wasn't he? I mean, technically, I think he counts as a Kryptonian. Like Smallville made it seem like he was more like a Kryptonian. Same thing with Reign on Supergirl. I think she kind of borderlines as a Kryptonian. Granted, she's not as Kryptonian as anyone else would be, because like, well, Kryptonite works on her, but only to a tiny extent. So she's like partial Kryptonian, more so experiment adaptation of hero of light / darkness type of thing. So, but obviously Seg didn't really care too much about what Adam was saying, because Adam kind of explained some things of like, why you? It's like, well, I'm kind of I was kind of the one that was chosen, and it's like basically he uses a device that lets him kind of do what he's doing to kind of get to not only across space but also across time and everything. Which is an element I didn't bring up last in the premiere, but that's still an element too. He knows what Krypton's future is. Obviously, he can't say much, because it's like no matter what, Superman's going to have to, like, things have to play out the way they need to, so Superman can end up on Earth. But that's got to be a little bit, and I think that might be an element that ends up playing into this show. He might get close to Seg and some of the others and feel like, because it seems like he's going to be on Krypton for a while. Because I thought that'd be something we see him popping in and out, but maybe he messed with the device a little bit more, so he's able to stay for a little bit longer, or maybe it is kind of a permanent thing. I doubt it's a permanent thing, because I'm sure he's still needed back in the future. Like I said, back in the future. Because I'm not that familiar with him, but it did seem like he is kind of big in the DC universe. I mean, it seems like he's a well enough established hero that I'm kind of like, I feel like you're kind of still needed in the future. So I feel like it's probably not going to be a permanent thing. So it's probably something we will be seeing him kind of popping in and out of time. But basically working with him, with Seg's buddy at the bar, isn't it? Is it Kim? He's the one that kind of he's trying to help prove that there is this whole Brainiac situation happening, because like I said, Seg's so focused on revenge. But Kim wants to believe too, because it's like he needs Seg not to go down this path, because it's going to make him everything's going to end up getting lost. But at the end of the day, it's like, well, for Seg, it's like he has nothing left. He's already lost his parents. He doesn't have the L name anymore. What does he have left? Nothing. He doesn't even have Lyda, because that's just a complicated situation, because it's like, well, your mom killed my parents, so that's kind of hard to overlook. We also learned a little bit more. Once again, like I said, I'm learning a little bit here and there about Krypton in Supergirl, in particular, like, their god Rao and stuff like that. But in this one, we ended up finding out they actually have other gods too, but Rao is kind of the one true god, because they used to worship all these other gods. That's actually what the mask represents. The mask that the voice of Rao is wearing represents all the different gods they used to worship, but they only worship Rao now, because Rao gave birth to... There was nothing but barren desolation, and he gave birth to what is Krypton, and it's just like, oh, he saw the wasted potential there, and kind of gave birth to almost like the perfection that is Krypton, which I'm sure people would make that argument. Yeah, if you're so perfect, why'd you die out? Why'd your entire planet get destroyed, only leaving 2 of your species alive, that being Kara and Clark? Which is a super mean way of putting it, but it's just in a very fucked up way. It's kind of funny when I've heard that argument in the past. It's just kind of interesting, but it seems like that's mainly Darren's like main agenda with this whole situation. Is like, yeah, he just like I don't get why they're fighting as hard as they are with certain things, like. Because it's like the whole reason with Val is like he was questioning their very way of life. I guess, like, do they not really, to be fair, at one point in time, like, Earth thought, like, oh, we were the center of the universe, and not, it's like, oh, the planet's flat, which, that's a whole discussion I'm not about to get into, but it's like, everyone has their own preconceived notions about, like, how the universe worked back then. So who's to say Krypton isn't the same way, that they think, like, oh, we're the center of the universe, like, there's nothing else out there, like, oh, there's something coming, some collector, something, like, no, that's nonsense. It's like, really? Like, I don't get why that is. Like, to be fair, it doesn't seem like it's just them. It just seems like it's everybody. And it seems like, I'm curious, like, what is the whole deal with the voice of Rao? Because it seems like he isn't just a bystander in this. Like I said, I get the feeling like there's more to that. Like, I brought it up before. It's like someone has come to change things to make it so that Superman doesn't exist. That can't just be Brainiac, because obviously, because that whole thing kind of gets in your head about it too, because it's like, is it Brainiac from the future that he's traveled back in time to eat all the universes, or is this Brainiac from in the past doing this? It's like, so does that mean he came across Krypton at some point in time, or is someone working with him on Krypton? Like, my money is on the voice of Rao. So it's like, is that like an embodiment of Brainiac in like a fake body? Did he go back in time and insert like a version of himself? I think I might have thrown that out there last episode. Or did someone, my theory was like, did someone else come back in time to do this? Because it's like, it can't just be Brainiac that's the reason why like Krypton's on the verge of destruction. Maybe it is, but the way the previews and the show's concept makes it seem like it was someone specifically coming back to do that. So I don't know whether Brainiac is or not. So that's just kind of an interesting development. What's interesting too is that Seg ends up discovering more about the Fortress of Solitude, that basically by using his blood he's able to unlock more of it. And what's interesting about his Fortress of Solitude is that the computer program represents itself as his grandfather Val, which is interesting because like usually when the Fortress of Solitude responds to Clark, it comes to him as his dad. So I guess the system kind of changes depending on the user. Because it's Seg, it goes to the person that's the most knowledgeable, the person that needs to teach him the most. Because his parents haven't had anything to do with the Fortress of Solitude. So maybe that's why. And I guess maybe before sending Clark off, like his Jor-El ended up messing with it or something like that, hence why he got him. I don't know, I'm just curious. That's just kind of an interesting thing to me. What was also interesting too is finding out like how he found out about this whole Brainiac situation. Apparently it was through the Phantom Zone, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't he saying like he's the one that made it, which is kind of interesting. Either way, I didn't even think about the Phantom Zone working the way that it does. It just never crosses my mind. I mean, it's not something that comes up a lot. Came up here and there in Smallville, but to be fair, it's been a little while since I watched Smallville, and it's only come up a tiny bit in Supergirl. It's literally the reason why Supergirl and the Fort Ross ended up like on Earth in the first place. But the fact is that basically Val was able to use it to travel across, do interdimensional travel across space and time, which makes sense because in the Phantom Zone, time doesn't exist. Because let's not forget, Kara didn't age because by the time she landed on Earth, she was still the same age, but Clark had already grown up and become Superman. There's that. But then there's also the aspect of like the fact is she went from Krypton to Earth. So obviously like there is some space travel involved, but it's just I never thought about it like that. So it's just kind of interesting. I wonder if that's something we're going to see utilized in this episode. I mean, sure, that computer is all that is Val, all he knew, all his beliefs and how he felt, and so it's essentially kind of him in a computer program. So say kind of how to operate it if need be, but I would assume that would come up in some shape or form. Might be how they ended up defeating I was literally about to say Doomsday Brainiac. So I don't know. I'm also curious to see what other secrets the Fortress of Solitude has at this point in time, or is it stuff that kind of gets added to later on by the later lines of the L's? Other things that kind of went down in this episode also, so much. Okay. So we had Adam having to give up his hat and his watch so that basically him and Kim could go out there and try and find any proof of Brainiac, which I felt so bad for him because it's kind of interesting. It's like, you're fighting so hard to keep a hat, but I guess it's like, for him, it's like the guy's not even going to appreciate it. It's a sports like reference, it's a sport he won't know anything about. You don't even like the team that hat's associated with. I love that he's kind of getting so mad about that. He's like, okay, here's the watch. And that guy wants a hat too. It's like, oh, come on. And Kim's like, I told you you'd have to probably give up the hat too. So that's kind of interesting. Along the same lines, the whole situation with, you had the whole situation with Nissa, and that was kind of, the moment she was kind of like, oh, here's your parents' ashes, because his parents were traitors, they couldn't be given a proper burial. And so I was kind of like, oh, that's the same as like, oh man, she's giving, it's like, oh, and at first I was kind of like, oh, that's sweet, that's super nice, and I'm like, she's manipulating him, isn't she? And it's like, yeah, because it turns out it was actually her idea, because this way, it seems like it isn't just Darren that's mixed up in this whole situation. It seems like she is too. For what purpose? I don't know why they're trying so hard to dismantle the L family. And like I said, maybe it is the fact is that one, like the voice of Rao is from the future and is guiding them, either because they're misguided and thinking like, oh, they'll get something more from it. It's like, oh, the L family is done being like the center of attention. We, the Vexes, shall rise and take our position. Maybe it's that. Maybe they're being misguided by their own greed, that they're not willing to see the bigger picture. Maybe that's what it is, but it does seem like she is just as involved in this. It's not just her dad that's at play here. She even admitted herself, like she was talking about the fact that she chose Seg, not just, she made her dad think, oh, he chose Seg for her, but she chose him by using her dad, which is like, I'm sure that's kind of still connected to she's trying to make it seem like her dad doesn't control her, that she's the one that's kind of in control, doing what she wants to. So now Seg trusts her a little bit more, which is kind of sad, but still. And on the other side of things, focusing on Lyta, basically she doesn't like the way her mom is handling things. It's kind of like, okay, we're going to attack the rankless just because we're trying to look for black zeros, and it's like we need to take care of them. But it's like, you're willing to hurt regular people, rankless? And that's kind of another thing too. Like I didn't even know that was a thing on Krypton. Like that's a kind of interesting development. It's learning that there is a hierarchy. There is like a social class. Like either you're part of the ranks or you're not. If you're not ranked, you're scum, you're dirt, you're filth. And it's kind of like, holy crap. And they're kind of like, oh, if we have to kill a few rankless to kind of track down some black zeros, who cares? Well, who's to say killing them is going to help you find black zeros? It will. How do you know that? It just will. It's like, really? Like, and I like Lyta trying to use a different approach, because it's like, all you're going to do is create a bigger divide between the different classes, between the ranked and the rankless. They already hate you a little bit for everything that you've done. Because obviously, like, I'm sure more fuel was added to the fire when you look at what happened to Seg's parents. Because the moment Seg was walking down the streets, like, you see other people looking at him. Even had a family, a mom and her daughter come visit, because it's like, oh, your mom and dad were such good to us. And the little girl even carves like the L family crest, the symbol for hope, which hasn't come up yet. But I don't, like I said, Man of Steel's the one that pushed that the most, but I swear it might have come up in Smallville or Supergirl too. I'm just not sure. Like their symbol not being an S, it's on Krypton, it is the symbol for hope. But I don't remember. Which I'm curious, like, did that come about first? Or is it, just kind of interestingly think about it. Like, was that established as a symbol? And then it's kind of like, oh yeah, like we, the House of L, shall take that symbol as our own. Or did it exist as the House of L symbol first? And then eventually it was later translated as like, oh yeah, we're going to make that symbol mean something. It means hope, Maybe it kind of coincided. Maybe it wasn't just one happened and then the other. Maybe they kind of happened simultaneously. Probably most likely that. But nevertheless, Lyta just doesn't like the way this is happening, but obviously she can't do anything in her position. Her mom's not willing to listen to her. I even like that moment, her being like, I know I'm disappointed in you, Mom. It's like, what? No, you're not. It's like, yeah, I know. You try and hide it, but I can see it in your eyes that you feel like I'll never really truly deserve the name Zod. So basically, she challenged her commanding officer, ended up killing him. It was a brutal fight. They hold no punches back on Krypton. I mean, to be fair, it was a fight to the death, smashing faces in, like, things got bloody, and she ended it by snapping the dude's neck. He was, like, asking for mercy, and she's kind of looking towards her mom, and she's just like, there's no such thing, we don't give mercy. I'm stumbling, I do apologize, and snapped his neck. And the crazy thing is, like, when it's all said and done, no matter what her reasons are, you can tell her mom is actually proud of her, because it's like, yeah, my daughter stepped up. She showed no mercy, and she's taken initiative. She's become a commander now. It's like, she's following in my footsteps. She still doesn't understand why Lyta does what she does, because I guess everyone's still oblivious to why Lyta... Because it's kind of interesting, because that other dude, the dude that was kind of like, no, don't come to me about innocence, because, like, the reason why he's so gung-ho about trying to track down Black Zero is because, not only his scars, but also for everything that he lost when it comes to his family. He came to her and was telling her that he knows that she's not like her mom, that her mom, like, you were just Lyta, you can only be you. Basically kind of what Lyta was telling Seg to do, just be true to who you are. Don't try to be anyone else but yourself. It's like your mom doesn't think you can live up to be the Zod name, but she's wrong. You are a warrior. You are a fighter. You are Lyta Zod. So I'm curious, does he know about the whole Seg situation? Because it seems like the mom doesn't know, because she's constantly like, why are you fighting so hard for Seg? You know, being so concerned about what happened to him and everything and what this could mean for him potentially, you know? Her mom did tell her it would be harder going forward, because it is a thing now. Yeah, even though Lyda has her position, she wants to kind of like not kind of be as gun-ho, but the situation is like, the fact of the matter is she might not have a choice. Obviously, you kind of have to follow orders and stuff like that. And even though she can dish out some orders now, who's to say, like, you know, she also probably has to earn her people's respect, which I guess she kind of already has by taking the position. But also at the same time, it's like, I get the feeling like most likely what will happen is that she'll make a decision, try to be, you know, still herself, and it ends up getting people killed. And so she has to change her perspective and start being kind of a lot more cold and calculated. Like, you know, it might be a situation where she ends up leading him into a black zero trap or something like that, trying to do the right thing, and it ends up costing her heavily. You know, I get the feeling like it's something like that, because I just get the feeling like, who she is personally, I feel like that's not sentiment you can have in the family of Zod. Which is kind of interesting, considering her mom is a little concerned, because she was just like, no, I don't want you to do this, back out. You know what this means, fight to death. So she was concerned. So her mom's not a terrible person. She legitimately does what she does what she's ordered to do. She's a good soldier, you know? And, you know, even if she has to be a little harsh to her daughter, she feels like it's going to make her stronger in the end, which right now kind of proves that. So ultimately, we'll see what happens with Lyda. Like I said, I just feel like being who she is now, there's no way she can stay like that and be a part of all of this, you know? It's just, I don't know if you can actually be you in that situation. Like, you know, it might call for her to kind of cut out that heart of hers, essentially. Because you can tell very heavily that Lyda's a very caring person, you know? So, but as we saw with this episode, like, there is no need for mercy, so it might not be need for putting feelings in the way, because it might just, well, get in the way. So we also have Seg doing the like badass thing of like, okay, I'll work with the Science Guild and stuff like that, I'll work with you, sure, but I will never bear the mark or name of Vex. You know, I would rather die rankless. Which you even have like the voice of Rao being like, yeah, you can do that. We'll let you bear the sigil of the Science Guild for now. So, but then even he's kind of like, well, this gives us further manipulation of it. It makes it easier to manipulate him. In what regard? I don't know. Maybe it's because if we let him kind of have his own way and think he's kind of getting his own way, he'll let his guard down. Because maybe it's a situation of like, yeah, you loosen the leash around his neck, let him think he's getting a little further and further away, but slowly and slowly, you're slowly shortening that leash, and it's getting tighter and tighter around his neck without him realizing it. Might be kind of what the voice is applying. Or maybe there's, you know, I feel like we still don't know enough about this voice of Rao to kind of really get enough of opinion about that. So, well, we also do know that I kind of could feed into my theory about, like, you know, Brainiac like being disguised as someone there on the planet, is the fact is that there is a scouter, basically, that Kim and Adam found, and it's basically a sign that Brainiac has, you know, scouted out a planet. So it was there amongst a meteor or something, so something came in through the atmosphere, so it kind of seems like Brainiac is probably there already walking amongst them, potentially, or maybe that was all rubble connected to the scouter. So, I mean, they're not picking up his spaceship or anything, so either it's further out so that none of Krypton's sensors can reach, or maybe it's heavily cloaked. I mean, that's a huge-ass ship. I don't know how you... I mean, he must have some advanced technology, which once again makes you wonder where the hell he comes from in this series. Like I said, I'm still stemming it from Krypton, but ultimately we'll have to wait and see, like, what happens with this. I'm very interested to see where all this takes us in the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good